We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Not getting a chance to get this out before,
Just turn it on.
Oh, you got it?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yep.
Awesome. So I realized this morning that the clock in the back of the room is not working and I don't have a watch. So who in here has a watch? I don't need to know what time it is right now, but here's what we're going to do. Raise your hand if you have a watch. What time is it now?
It's time to get yourself a watch.
11:57. Thanks, Quinn. When we get to like 12:15, throw that at me and let me know. Cool. 11:15. 12:15. 12:15. 11:15, half an hour ago. All right, who remembers what we've been going through the last couple of weeks? Saints and sinners. Awesome. What are some of the people that we've talked about from the Bible? Ruth. Mary. We talked about God. Did y'all have any favorites? Mary, Ruth, God's a good one. Personal favorite of mine. So far we talked about a lot of really cool people from the Bible, right? That did amazing things. Like Brett talked last week about how Mary said yes to this crazy, ridiculous thing that the angel told her she was going to have to do. This week is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be this uplifting, encouraging thing. This week we get to talk about Judas. Everybody say boo. Yeah, Judas kind of gets a bad rap, doesn't he?
And he was supposedly the first vampire.
Judas kind of gets a bad rap, but honestly, he kind of deserves it, right? Like this is somebody who betrayed Jesus, who sold him to the Pharisees. Yeah, you can stop saying food now. It's fine. We got the picture. He betrayed Jesus, sold him to the Pharisees so that they could turn around and kill him, right? I think there's a picture up here. Y'all have probably seen the Last Supper painting by Leonardo da Vinci. And Judas is the guy kind of with the white hair, and he's the second from the right, and he just looks like ugly and mean. Doesn't he? Like everybody else is kind of like, a normal looking dude, and then Judas just looks angry. So you can take that down. But Judas just has this terrible reputation. And while the thing that he did was terrible, the reason that we're talking about it tonight is not, or this morning, is not so we can say, look at what a terrible person Judas was and look at all the bad things that he did. I think the scary thing about talking about Judas is that when we get down to it, every single one of us says, I'm a little bit more like that than I realized. We're a lot more like Judas than we realized at first. And that's what we're going to spend this morning talking about, is one, why Judas did the things that he did, and how we look like that in our own lives. So to illustrate a little bit of that, there's really only one story in the Bible one story about Judas outside of the one where he betrays Jesus. And that's what we're going to read right now, just to try to get to know a little bit more about this guy. It's from John 12. It'll be on the screen behind me. You don't have to turn there. John 12, starting in verse 1. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, the one Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha was serving them, and Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with them. Then Mary took a pound of perfume, pure and expensive nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped his feet with her hair. So the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Then one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was about to betray him, said, "Why wasn't this perfume sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" He didn't say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He was in charge of the money bag and would steal part of what was put in it. Judas honestly seems like kind of a grumpy guy here, right? Like Mary has just done this beautiful thing that honors Jesus, and he says, what a waste, look at all of this money that you just dumped out that you could have done some good things with. I don't know about y'all, but I don't really know what a 300 denarii is. So I had to do some Googling and I had to do some math. And I found out that 300 denarii is about $20,000. It's a lot of money that Mary just kind of dumped out on the floor, right? So on one hand, Judas he's not wrong. It's a lot of money, and they probably could have fed a lot of people with that, right? But on the other hand, Mary recognizes who Jesus is, and she says, "This is God sitting here in my house, and He is worth more than whatever I could do with this perfume or whatever else that I have." So I think here's an example that I kind of really only thought about this morning. So yesterday I went to a wedding for a good friend of mine. Have any of y'all ever been to a wedding? Yeah, they're a ton of fun. There's people there, and I got to see a bunch of my friends that I haven't seen since college, and there was food and dancing and all this stuff, and there's all the lovey-dovey things happening too, which I guess is cool. But I was really there for the food and the dancing and the people. But I don't know if y'all know this. Weddings are kind of expensive. Like $20,000 expensive.
That's cheap. That's cheap.
Yes, $20,000 is actually a pretty cheap wedding.
The average is
blows my
$32K.
mind. There's so much money, right?
Yeah.
But you're there and you're having fun. And you think this is a great thing, right? We're celebrating these two people and the way that they love each other, and this is good. So I'm just imagining, what if somebody had walked in, one of my friends, and said something like, "Gosh, guys, I'm glad y'all are married, but this was a lot of money that you kind of just wasted on your wedding. Your kids are going to have to go to college one day, and how are you going to pay for that if you just dropped $20,000 on a wedding? Or you're going to have to buy a house, or all of these different things." And people would have looked at him and said, "Dude, you're missing the point, right? You're not wrong. We could have done some great things with those $20,000, but the point is not the money, right? The point is that we're married, and that's more important than this $20,000. And that's what Mary is saying in this moment, right? Is I recognize that Jesus is worth more than this money and what I could have done with this. It's the song that we just sang. Jesus is worth more than all riches. And it seems like Judas hasn't quite figured that out yet. He will eventually, I hope. So what I want us to get out of the story right now is that Judas is a money guy, right? This is something that's important to him. He's probably really thrifty. This is something he thinks about a lot. And so when he sees Mary pour out this perfume, he says, "Oh, but that's so much money that we could have done so many good things with." So now he's a money guy. What happens when he goes to the Pharisees to betray Jesus? This is in Matthew 26. Again, you don't have to turn there, but it'll be on the screen behind me. It says, "Then one of the 12, a man called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, 'What are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you?' So they weighed out 30 pieces of silver for him. And from that time, he started looking for a good opportunity to betray him." Are we really surprised? Right, Judas is the money guy, and he's thinking stealing stuff from the money bag, and he's thinking about instead of honoring Jesus, we could have done other things with that money. And so then he goes to betray Jesus, and they say, "Well, here's, I didn't do the math on 30 pieces of silver, but I would imagine it's not $20,000, right? Here's $100, and he says, "Great, that's exactly what I wanted." Let's be fair here. Mary knew that Jesus was somebody worth following. When she poured the perfume out over his feet, what she was probably thinking is, my brother Lazarus is in the room right now eating dinner with us, and the only reason he's here is because a month ago, Jesus raised him from the dead. We had wrapped him up, he was in the grave, he was done, and Jesus said, "Lazarus, come out of there," and Lazarus walks out of the grave. And so Mary is sitting there with this reminder in front of her of Jesus' power. How could she forget or deny, right, that he is worth so much? Does Judas have something like that? Did Jesus ever raise one of Judas's relatives from the dead? Maybe. I don't know. If he did, it's not in the Bible. But Judas has so many other things that are just as powerful. He followed Jesus around for years, right? He was there when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. And he was there when Jesus did all of his other incredible miracles. But the crazy thing is it goes even further than that. There's a moment early in Jesus' ministry when he sends the 12 disciples out. So we're going to read this little bit from Luke 9, where he says, summoning the 12, this is Jesus, he gave them power and authority over all the demons and to heal diseases. Then he sent them to proclaim the kingdom of God and heal the sick. Take nothing for the road, he told them, no staff, no traveling bag, no bread, no money, and don't take an extra shirt. Whatever house you enter, stay there and leave from there. If they do not welcome you when you leave that town, shake the dust from your feet as a testimony against them. So they went out and traveled from village to village, proclaiming the good news and healing everywhere. Judas is one of these people. Jesus said to Judas, you have authority over demons. You have the power to heal the sick. Judas has seen Jesus perform miracles, and he's performed those miracles himself. Judas has seen people healed and seen demons cast out of people because he had the power of Jesus in him that allowed him to do that, right? So we can't say, oh, Judas didn't know who Jesus was. He knew exactly who Jesus was, but at the end of the day, what was more important to him? It wasn't the fact that Jesus was the Son of God. It was the money that he could get out of it.
Greed is why he did what he did. He did it out of greed.
Does any of that sound familiar? Maybe not about money, but about something else. Right, here's an example from my life. So way back in the day, when I was in college, wasn't actually that long ago. Wasn't that long ago. One of my roommates introduced me to this video game called League of Legends.
No.
I hear people laughing.
No.
So it means we're on the same page here. If you watched Current Events with Devont last week, then you know a little bit about League of Legends and how ridiculous it is, right? But I was hooked. I played so much League of Legends. I was on a team, like we played in tournaments. I have a t-shirt with like my name on the back of it for my team. I have a trophy that we won in a League of Legends tournament. Like, I was really into League of Legends. It's kind of embarrassing. And what I realized kind of a couple months into this is, gosh, this is all I talk about now. You know, like I'm having lunch with my roommate and we're just talking about, you know, whatever you talk about when you talk about League of Legends. And just like back and forth and back and forth. And then other people would kind of join the conversation, but they didn't like know what we were talking about. And I would think, gosh, I kind of feel bad because they're just totally lost right now and they are not a part of this conversation. But like that's all that we talked about. And at this point, I was a Christian. I went to Austin Stone. I was a students leader. So some of y'all probably knew me while this was happening. Right, I like went on mission trips. I put my hands up during worship. I did all the Christian things. Right, I still see some of y'all smirking at me like this is ridiculous. And it is ridiculous. That's why we're talking about it. The deal is, if someone had followed me around for a day and just kind of been a fly on the wall in my life, what would they think was the most important thing to me? Would they have said, "Gosh, this guy really loves Jesus. Like clearly Jesus is pretty cool." No, I never talked about Jesus. I was just talking about video games all the time. And so finally, around my senior year of college, I sat down and I said, this isn't healthy. This isn't right. You know, like I say that Jesus is really important and that God is this amazing thing worth following. And then I just play video games all the time. I talk about video games all the time. So I stopped playing League of Legends. I uninstalled it from my computer. I did all the things, right? And my walk with God has been so much better since that point, right? Because all of a sudden God is now more important to me than the video games that I was putting above him on the priority list. But the point is, right, follow me around for a day and you would have said, oh, this guy like loves League of Legends. You would not have said, oh, he loves Jesus. That sounds kind of like Judas, right? Judas talks about money when Mary is honoring Jesus and doing this amazing thing. He's saying, oh, but what about the money that you basically just threw away, right? Or when he betrays Jesus, he says, okay, like how much money can you give me for this? And I think if we're honest with ourselves, we all have something like that. It might not be money or video games. It might be sports or grades or relationships or whatever it is. But there's something for every single one of us that we always want to talk about. Like if somebody were to bring up Stranger Things, you'd be like, yes, I love talking about Stranger Things. Like, let's talk about this for hours and hours and hours. And all of the ridiculous theories I have about what's going on. And then someone says, oh, what did you think of the sermon on Sunday? And you say, oh, I'd rather go back and talk about Stranger Things. Right? Here's the problem. Is that Jesus talks about people like that, right? People like Judas, who do the Christian things, but they don't follow Jesus, right? There's a difference between knowing Jesus and knowing Jesus. And I get that that's a little confusing. I'm sorry, we'll talk about it later. I just used the same word twice with different meanings. But Jesus talks about what happens here, right? What the deal is with those people. In Matthew 7, which will also be on the screen behind me. Have these been on the screen behind me? I haven't been looking. Okay. Just making sure. Here's what Jesus said. He says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name and drive out demons in your name and do many miracles in your name? Then I will announce to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you lawbreakers. That's a really scary passage for me to read. Because it's easy to apply it to Judas, right? Judas did miracles in the name of Jesus, and he cast out demons in the name of Jesus. And at the end of the day, what was more important to him? Not Jesus, but the money. Right? At the end of the day, Judas is in a bad place. The reason this is scary for me to read is because I think about my own life and the lives of all the people that I know and the people in this room, and I think, we look a lot like that. Right? If Judas were alive today, let's say he went to Austin Stone, what would he look like? He would go to church on Sundays. He'd probably put his hands up during worship. He'd be in a decom, or he'd lead a decom. He'd go on mission trips. He'd, passages highlighted in his Bible and little notes written in the margins. But if you were to follow him around for a day or have a conversation with him, he would always want to talk about money or girls or video games or football, basketball, Stranger Things, whatever it is. And then you say, okay, well, what did you think about, this passage in the Bible? If you wanted to talk about Jesus, you would suddenly have nothing to say. To me, that sounds really familiar. I just described Judas, but I bet if we're honest with ourselves, this describes some of us here today. So my question is, do I know Jesus, or am I just doing the Christian things? This is a question that we all need to ask ourselves, because nobody wants to end up like Judas with everybody in history looking back on you and thinking, wow, what a screw up. Right? Do I know Jesus, or am I just doing the Christian thing? So what does it mean to know Jesus? That's a fantastic question. That's not a question that I'm going to give you the answer to. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to close this in prayer, and then we're going to break up into small discussion groups, and we'll have a couple discussion questions, including just talking about what does it mean to know Jesus, just in general and in my life. Does that sound good? God, thank you for the examples that you give us in the Bible, both of what we should do and of what we shouldn't do. Because it's really, really easy for us to think that we're doing great and not realize that on the inside we are so messed up, so broken. Help us to set our eyes on you and to remember that you are better than everything else in this world, whether it's money or comfort, good things or bad things, that you are greater than all of them. Amen. So find a discussion group, 4 or 5 people, preferably with the leader. High school dudes, I'm looking at you back there. I know you're slacking off.
I said stop.
You turn.
So the first question, what would your friend say is the most important thing to you? What is it that you always want to talk about? Take a couple minutes. So what do y'all think?